Hey everyone, welcome back. It appears that we have re-entered a new bull market for Bitcoin, which means that the value of your Bitcoin in fiat terms is going to increase. So I believe it's important for people to remember why we got into this space in the first place. The reason why we got into this space for most of us is because at some point or another, you realized that Bitcoin is money. Now, I know we use it to transact, I know we call it money, but my argument today is that fiat is not money, and I plan to lay out that case very clearly, and hopefully by the end of this video, despite what the dollar or fiat price to Bitcoin is, you will choose to hold your Bitcoin, choose to keep your Bitcoin, and not only that, but self-custody your Bitcoin. So before we can start talking about money, we first need to discuss what human beings value, okay? What do we value? Now, in order to answer that, we have to discuss what human beings are, okay? And stick with me for a little while because I'm going to build on some concepts here that are going to lead to my inevitable conclusion that Bitcoin is money, fiat is not. So human beings are two things. We are mortal and we're social. We're mortal and we're social. Mortality, we die, right? This means that we die, we don't live forever, which means the two things that we value above all else are our time and our energy. Time and energy. When we work, we use our time and our energy. We spend or expend our time and energy for the purpose of being productive. The goal of that productivity, of course, is to create goods and services of value through time and energy. And thus it stands that anything of value will require a significant amount of time and energy to produce. So think about this in any manner of human activity. A relationship, a car, a house, a laptop, a phone. If it doesn't take a substantial amount of time and energy to produce, then it's probably not worth much. It's probably not very valuable, right? And again, this holds true in basically every manner of human activity. If it doesn't take time and energy, then it's probably not worth anything. Okay, and so the product itself is a manifestation of time and energy. The product itself is a manifestation of time and energy. The second thing that human beings are, we're social, right? This means, it doesn't mean that we like talking to each other or whatever. It just means that in our world, in our society, we work better through collaboration, through communication, right? We find success in the ability to work with others. In fact, we're the only species that can really do it, especially at large scales. So inevitably, in order to work with humans, in order to collaborate with other humans, we need an ability to trade, right? There has to be a trade involved. And so that trade requires or necessitates a way to communicate value, evaluate, and also communicate value to other people. This is how much time and energy this thing took, right? I need to be able to express that to you so that we can make a fair trade, right? I'm not going to give you a banana for a house, right? You wouldn't take that, okay? Because it's not a fair trade, right? The amount of time and energy it takes to produce a banana is not equal to the amount of time and energy that it takes to build a house, right? Obviously. So again, time and energy, and then we also have the need to trade and the need to express the value of the products, goods, and services that we've created. Okay? So in other words, we needed a money. We needed a way to communicate value. Okay? Now, in order for this to be successful, this necessitated a neutral artifact that is universally deemed valuable by both parties. Okay? Okay, so what is money? The concept of money predates history. It predates written record. We've always had money because we've always, as human beings, needed to trade. So I'll start by reading the dictionary definition of money, and then hopefully I can provide you with a better definition of money, one that kind of clears the air and provides a little more clarity as to what money is. Okay, so here's the dictionary definition, and hold on to your seats, it's amazing. Money, a current medium of exchange in the form of coins and banknotes. Coins and banknotes collectively. Example, I counted the money before putting it in my wallet. Still don't know what money is? I don't blame you. While this is an acceptable definition of money, it tells us absolutely nothing about money, its creation, its function, its value, its distribution. We don't know anything about money. Apparently, it comes from a bank because it's in the form of banknotes. But we don't know anything else about it. And in fact, that's not accurate. Okay? So what I'm going to do here is provide you with a better definition, because it's this very definition here that is the source of so much confusion about money, because it's inaccurate. As previously stated, money as a concept predates history. Okay? So because it predates history, I'm going to make it a more generalized statement. Money is anything, and I mean anything, that we accept as payments for a good, product, service, or commodity. It's that simple. Okay? It's that simple. Furthermore, money functions as a messaging system. As I mentioned before, we needed a way to communicate value. So money serves as a messaging system. Okay? A way for us to communicate value, time, and energy. So money serves several functions. The first function is a unit of account. There is no way to discuss work and productivity without discussing time and energy. And as I mentioned before, we needed a way to communicate information about value, time, and energy. So when we work, we expect compensation for the value that we create. In a perfect world scenario, each unit of money that you earn as compensation would be equal or comparable to the amount of value you produced, right? Meaning that for every dollar that I make, I produce a dollar worth of value, right? I spend my time and my energy to produce something, and hopefully I'm fairly compensated for that action. Now, of course, that's not always the case. Again, that's a perfect world scenario. And this is kind of where the concept of money becomes very difficult to discuss, because people begin to conflate their personal value, their time and their energy, their life, with the amount of money that they make, with the amount of money that's in their bank account. And for every reason in the world, that is false, right? I know that there's some little wee guys out there who believe that their bank account is a representation of their value, but I can tell you right now, that is not the case. That is absolutely false. And if you fell for it, then you're a sucker, because we're all being pimped out by the government. And I'm going to explain to you exactly why. Okay. Now, again, like I said before, we use it as a unit of account, right? And so again, in a perfect world, in a fair world where money is money and money actually maintains value, then yes, the amount of money that you earn would be comparable to the amount of value that you produce. But that is no longer the case. And in fact, it cannot be the case for the reasons I'm going to lay out in this video. Okay. So unit of account. The second thing that it does is it acts as a store of value. So once you've earned this money, you have a decision to make, right? The decision is to spend it immediately, meaning you're going to take this money that you've earned and you're going to give it, or sell it to someone else to buy their time and energy, right? You're going to award it to someone else for their time and their energy, right? Makes sense. I need your time and energy to build this thing. I need your time and energy to, drive me to, work, right? I'm going to use you and your time, your energy to do this service. And I'm going to pay you for it. I'm going to compensate you for that time and energy, right? Or if you're someone who's thrifty and has a lower time preference, you can choose to defer payments or defer spending for the purchase of storing and, stockpiling your time and energy, money, so that you can use it later. Now, there are obvious reasons to do this. There are obvious reasons to store your value: retirement, buying a house, college funds. These are all reasonable reasons to store your value and defer payments, defer spending for a later date, right? So effectively, when you do this, you are taking money that you stored, right? You're using the past to pay for the present, or even the future for that matter. This only works, however, if the money that you have does not fall victim to debasement. If your money is debased, this does not work, okay? There's no way that your money can maintain value if it's being debased, and thus it will no longer work as a store of value. You cannot store your time and energy in this money because it no longer maintains its value as money, time and energy, right? So the final thing that money functions as is a medium of exchange, okay? And what this basically means is that everybody accepts this money as universally valuable, and any version of the money that you give me should be acceptable. I should trade this dollar for this dollar, and you can't tell the difference. That's what that means, okay? And furthermore, in order for it to be a proper medium of exchange, it needs to maintain its value, right? I can't take this dollar if I know it's going to lose 99% of its value the moment I get it from you. It's not a proper medium of exchange, right? Okay, so let's discuss the types of money. Okay, there are three basic types of money. Okay, there's commodity money, there's representative money, and then there's fiat currency. Again, in this video, I'm making the case that fiat is not money, but I'm putting it on the list because in order to debunk it as money, I need to show you what the differences are and distinguish it from the other forms of money. Okay, so commodity money is up first. Commodity monies are said to have intrinsic value, which means that their value extends beyond its utility as money. Okay, so that means it's a good. It's a good that has value beyond its utility as money. So the easiest way to think about this, for example, would be salt, sugar, gold, silver, oil. These are all commodity monies because although we use them as money, they do have a utility beyond that use case. Okay. Now, there's obvious reasons why these are not efficient monies. We can go into those a little bit later, but this is a form of money, right? The next type of money is called representative money. And this money is said to not have intrinsic value because it's not usable as a good, okay? Which means it doesn't have any function beyond its utility as money. It's a banknote, it's an IOU, and what you can do is you can take this to the bank and they will convert that IOU into the gold or the money that underlies it, okay? Which means it's a fancy IOU. That's all it means, okay? Now, this is more efficient, but it comes with its own set of problems, and we'll discuss those as well. Okay, so the final form of money, the final type of money is fiat currency, okay? Now, fiat currency is said to have no intrinsic value and also doesn't represent anything of value. And thus its value is derived from government mandate, policies, enforcements, and general threats of violence if you don't use it, okay? And that's essentially where it ends, okay? Its power comes from government regulation and today, specifically, military activity, okay? That's where the power of fiat comes from. Okay, so we're going to move on into the pros and cons of each of these. I think they're fairly obvious. Commodity monies, although the rawest form of money, because they require substantial amounts of time and energy, they are a bearer asset, and generally speaking, they are usable as a good. They have a laundry list of downfalls, right? Their downfalls include the fact that they're not as durable. Maybe they're not as transportable, and they're generally just risky to handle, right? In other words, bananas rot, horses die, and land doesn't move. Gold is heavy, right? These are all the reasons why commodity monies are inefficient monies, right? Yes, they are money, but they're very inefficient in practice. So what you end up doing is giving your asset to a custodian who holds it for you and issues you a note in return. Now, obviously, this comes with its own set of problems because although convenient, you've had to relinquish control of your asset, of your money, to a third party and trust that they're going to be responsible with it, okay? Now, obviously, their job, their game is to make money. Okay? They don't make money just holding your money. They have to use your money as a vehicle in order to get money, right? So, of the things that the custodian can do, they can inflate the money, which means they can print more IOUs against the same redeemable quantity of gold, silver, or whatever the money may be that underlies the asset. This is called inflation. And the reason they do this is so they can loan that money or sell that money to someone else through rehypothecation. Okay. The other thing they can do is, of course, they're expecting a return on that, by the way. The other thing they can do is they can use your asset as a debt instrument, okay? Effectively making your money a debt collateral so they can pull resources under or on top of your assets, right? Makes your asset or your money a debt collateral. Okay, so they're borrowing against your money, right? All three of these things, the inflation, the rehypothecation, and the debt collateral, put your money at risk. And believe me, banks will do it. That is what they do. Okay. So your money's at risk. These are the dark side of IOUs, right? This is the dark side of having an IOU. Yes, they're convenient, but people are effectively gambling and inflating your money. Okay. Now we're getting to fiat. And all the issues with IOUs, the government just takes that to a whole nother level. I mean, astronomically insane with how they handle money. So before we can discuss that, we have to go into a brief history of how we got to the fiat system and why we no longer use representative monies. So it all started right after World War II in the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, where all the nations, the global powers, got together and decided to custody their money with the United States. They all put their gold and their SDRs into the United States because the United States was the safest option. They were the safest place to put the money because they weren't in Europe. They were a neutral force until the end of the war. And as such, most countries agreed that America was the best place to host their money. This effectively made the United States dollar the world reserve currency, right? Backed against the world's gold reserves, making the United States effectively the world's bank. And like any bank, what did they do? They inflated the supply of money against the same quantity of redeemable gold. Now, the justification for this was to loan money to European powers so that they could rebuild their nations after the World War, right? America is the safest option. Everybody's holding and hiding their gold in America. So this makes sense, okay? And America is going to lend money to foreign nations so they can rebuild. It's always some nicely packaged lie. Now, sometime later, America began to run into some hiccups, okay? Again, we're still printing money, right? We began running into some hiccups because of rising inflation, and economy and stagflation, meaning we weren't being as productive or efficient or effective as we should have been at this time. We were in a 20-year war with Vietnam, and we had consistent account deficits, period, across the board. Now, all of these factors coalesced into an overwhelming amount of stress on the system. And whenever the system gets stressed, especially when we're dealing with money, people start worrying, okay? And these nation states begin to worry. Where are you getting all this money from, right? How are we going to pay all this back? If you're loaning money, but you're also in a war, your country's in stagflation, we're experiencing rapid inflation here. England's got to run on the bank, right? What are we going to do? Of course, nations began to panic, and when nations panic, people panic, okay? So, of course, these nations begin to demand their gold back. They want their money back, right? They realize America's not the safe option. They realize that the stagflation, all the issues, the war, the panic is too far spread. We need our money back, right? We don't trust you guys anymore. Okay. So Nixon complied, of course, but his response to this was not only compliance, but a complete decoupling of the United States dollar from gold. And here's where the trouble started. Because when your money, your fiat in this case, has no money behind it, it no longer represents time and energy. It no longer represents value. You see where I'm going? And when that's the case, what you're stuck with is a debt instrument that nobody really has to use unless you force them. And when you understand this, the slaves and pyramids sitting on our money start to make a little more sense, right? Because really what they're doing is they've created a top-down capital flow where the people closest to the money printer benefit the most while everybody else is a serf. The serf economy with top-down capital flows where they borrow against the future to pay for the past instead of the other way around, right? Now, I don't want to go all the way into the details of this because it's such a tangled web of corruption that it would take me several videos, hours and hours of time to explain just how corrupt it all is. But just to give you an illustration, I'll give you a scenario. Imagine that you invented a credit card in your unborn great-grandchild's name. So imagine you invented a credit card in your unborn great-grandchild's name. Should be illegal, but apparently the government's doing it. You use this credit card to pay off a credit card that you opened yesterday. Now you maxed out this credit card paying off credit card that you opened last month. And you've been doing this for 40 years straight. If that sounds corrupt, that's because it is. If that sounds financially irresponsible, that's because it is. But that's the fiat system. It borrows from the future to pay for the past. And all the while, by the way, each of these cards is accruing interest. So not only are you drowning in the principal, but you're also drowning in the interest payments. We can't afford any of it. So what do? You invent another credit card in your great-great-grandchild's name to pay off the previous credit card. And on the cycle continues. Oh, countdown to the debt clock. Oh, countdown till we run out, till U.S. insolvency. We're never going to run out of money because they're just going to print it, right? They're not fooling anybody. They use these events to buzz up news, to push forward and sneak in new little laws that give them more power, pay off their buddies, and also print money for the military, for Social Security, and all these other, things that the government pays for. But of course, none of that money ever trickles down to the regular person. That's not how that works, right? It always trickles down to the institutions that use the money to buy back their stocks or, rent seek, right? These big pharma companies that are rent seekers, effectively looking for deals on deals, back scratch on back scratch for money paid to these politicians, right? It's just a complete system of corruption. Now, that's nationally. Internationally speaking, we're dealing with a vampiric debt instrument that is used as a system of oppression worldwide. If you're an American and you don't use the US dollar, you go to jail, right? That's what happens to you. You're forced to use this. You don't have a choice. We mandate that you use this. If you're going to do any trade or have any transactions in the United States, you better pay your taxes in US dollar or you go to jail. We are forcing you to do this. There's no questions asked. If you're a foreign nation, you need to use US dollars if you want to secure energy. And we all know that the real deal here, the real security of any nation is its ability to control energy, period. That's what it's all about. Energy is at the bottom of everything. All right, so if you want to secure energy, you have to have US dollars. Or we call you a terrorist, we find a way to go to war with you. Look at Saddam Hussein. 2001, he took Iraq off the dollar standard, right? He started accepting euros for oil, for energy. Strike one. And then he refused to revert back to US dollar. Strike two. And then in 2003, he doubled down on it and basically moved to terminate all US dollar transactions in Iraq. Strike three. 2 years later, that dude's hanging from a rope. They had a little mock trial for him. They staged a little trial for him. And then a couple months later, he was hanging from a rope. We're talking about the leader of a nation that within 3 years was dead. So, of course, we know that the dollar system, fiat, not just the dollar, but all fiats, are a tool of subjugation, right? They're no longer a tool that we all find valuable, right? It's no longer universally accepted as valuable, right? We are all forced to use it, and thus the value is your ability to survive, right? No money, no power, no voice, okay? Okay, so let's get rid of the dollar for a moment, and let's talk about where Bitcoin fits into this equation. Now, the value of Bitcoin, let's just discuss that for a moment. Now, like all monies, Bitcoin is a product of time and energy. And I'm going to read this to you because I just made this like yesterday. Okay. In fact, this video was inspired by a conversation that I had with a friend on the subway, in which case she began talking about money. And it became very clear that she didn't understand what money was. And she knows I'm a Bitcoiner, but, I don't push it on anyone. And I don't try to, push my ideas on other people. I don't think it's really fair. But if you find me and if you ask about it, I'll give you everything I got. And so I'm creating this video for the purpose of defining and articulating or expressing important traits about money. Okay. So I'm going to read this because I don't have it all memorized. This conversation happened a couple days ago and I basically just wrote it down. So like all money, Bitcoin is a product of time and energy. Every 10 minutes, participating network computers are awarded newly minted Bitcoin for using time and energy to secure the network. Therefore, the issuance of Bitcoin is both a block reward and a method of algorithmically controlled inflation. And yes, Bitcoin is inflationary, but that inflation is controlled by an algorithm, not by a government mandate.
And that's the trick in the Bitcoin space and in the stable coin space, is that there's no real government regulation of this stuff to make sure that the promises that's made when the trade happens actually have anything to back them up.
Bitcoin is a network protocol that's secured by time and energy, proof of work, and it provides final settlement transfer of messages without credit or counterparty risk. Furthermore, the protocol ensures a hard cap supply of 21 million units and a fixed issuance schedule without an issuer or a central financial planner. So Bitcoin is a protocol secured by time and energy, and it's used to send messages from peer to peer without a third-party intermediary. The best money that we've ever had. If you don't understand that, then I'd argue that you haven't been listening and that you still don't really understand money. Does Bitcoin have intrinsic value? This is the question that both detractors and newbies alike will ask. And honestly, it's not really relevant. As we discussed before in previous sections, the intrinsic value of a money does not speak to its efficiency as money or its value as money. Okay, so Bitcoin versus gold, we don't really need to get into this. Bitcoin enjoys all the benefits of gold and none of its drawbacks, right? It's portable, divisible, secure, and algorithmically finite. Let's move on. Bitcoin versus fiat. The reason this is important, and I've just discussed fiat on every term as to why it's not money. The dollar no longer represents money. It no longer has money backing it, which means it no longer represents time and energy, which is a basic requirement of money. The dollar effectively enjoys the ability to print forever through the exploitation of citizens and sovereign states. They infinitely print it from the future to pay for the past. And the reason why the Bitcoin fiat argument is important is because you have to understand the impact that fiat is having on the economy. Not only are people's livelihoods being stolen from them through the printing and inflation, but it's also causing people to take riskier moves with the money that they have, right? It's pushing people way out there on the risk curve, trying to look for yield, trying to look for ways to hide the money so that they don't lose it all to inflation and debasement and theft, right? So if you're a regular Joe, you're just taking an L. If you're in Fiat and you're a regular Joe, you're just losing. You're a loser. That's it. And I'm not saying that personally. I'm just saying that you are losing, period. There is no way of saving your bank account. You're taking an L. Okay? If your money's stuck in a bank somewhere, you're a loser. If your money's under your mattress, you're also a loser. Your money is losing value day after day. Now, if you're a regular guy, you can choose to take that money, that fiat, if that's what you want to call it. I'm calling it fiat, not money. You can choose to take that fiat and you can put it into the market, right? Which means you can buy the government bonds, you can buy their debt, and you can, take an L that way, right? If inflation's at 8% and the bond yield is at 5%, you're taking a 3% haircut, but at least you're not losing 100%. You're still losing, right? Still taking a massive loss. Not as bad. Same thing with the stock market. Not as bad, right? The next thing you can do is, if you're a high net worth individual, is that you can give your money to an asset manager like BlackRock. And guess what they're going to do? BlackRock is going to take all of your money and they're going to start investing it in vehicles like housing markets, real estate. They're going to start investing in things. And so what you've got here is now you've got $1 trillion asset managers buying single family homes, not to live in, right? But as investment properties. And so you and me who want to buy a home are competing with BlackRock. And yes, they're coming in 3 to 8% over asking because they can, right? They've got the world's resources behind them. They can come in over asking if they want. It's an investment to them, right? You're trying to buy a house to live in. All the while, you can't even afford it because the value of your money is decreasing, right? And so year over year, the only thing you can do is work that much harder, get that many more jobs, have that many more side hustles to pay for a house. Or let's forget a house, to get back to zero, right? You just want to get back to zero. That's the goal, right? All these side hustles just to get back to zero. That's incredible. And now you got guys like Justin Trudeau out here blaming farmers, blaming Taylor Swift. They're blaming everybody but themselves for their own monetary policy, which is to print. Because as long as the money is a debt instrument, they can print it for free. And they charge the future, right? And charge you through sneak taxes and inflation, right? That's how it works. And so as long as they have that tool, the people closest to the money printer will benefit. Everybody else is taking an L. Okay. Now, is there anyone in the world who can say that they make 8% more every year? No, that's not even possible. You know why? Because the companies are also experiencing the same inflation.
It's not okay that our biggest grocery stores are making record profits while Canadians are struggling to put food on the table. So Minister Champagne will be calling on the heads of large grocers to come to Ottawa with a plan to address the rising cost of food. And we expect to hear from them by Thanksgiving on what their plan is to stabilize prices. And let me be very clear. If their plan doesn't provide real relief for the middle class and people working hard to join it, then we will take further action, and we are not ruling anything out, including tax measures.
Right? So yeah, the grocery store is charging $3 more because that 5 is now worth 2, so they got to charge 8, right? Then those numbers are way off. I don't know what the numbers really are, but that's the concept. The nominal value is the same, but the actual value has decreased. So they need to charge more because the company's job is to show a profit. And if they can't show a profit, then people will drop the stock. And that's the last thing anybody wants, right? The shareholders don't want that. The CEO doesn't want that. The president doesn't want that. Everybody loses. And the government's job is to prop up that stock market to make it look as if everything is going well. Because we all know the stock market is the indication of the health and wealth of your society. Stock prices drop, we got a problem. It's incredible. It's just a tangled web of corruption. Tangled web of corruption. And all this does is enforce risky behavior and rent seeking. Risky behavior and rent seeking because the money's broken, right? And all the while you're sitting at home thinking you're not good enough, you're not doing enough because the money's funny. It's incredible. So I hope I laid out very clearly for you the reasons why I believe that fiat is not money and that Bitcoin is money, because Bitcoin represents time and energy. Bitcoin is secure. Bitcoin is peer-to-peer. Bitcoin is algorithmically finite, right? This bull market is coming. And the reason why it's coming is because there's an infinite amount of cash flow out there and only 21 million units to absorb it. I hope you guys have a good weekend. Please, please, please stay focused. You're going to see that dollar price go through the roof and you're going to get excited. But remember why you're here. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.